Welcome to Green and Gold FC.
And then poked home by Tim Cahill. Australia have done it! From right the Matildas into history. Cue the party! The best team of the A-League era. And it goes. Oh! It's a save that means the world to Australia.
Hello and welcome to Green and Gold FC. I am very pleased to have a very special guest today, Tom's son, Tom Byer, who has been the person who's overseen the Japanese football revolution and basically how they've gone from, as that famous quote says, always in our shadow, to today where they're producing loads of players in the top leagues of the world and have a technical ability which is absolutely the envy of every Australian football fan. How are you going, Tom?
Good, Graham. Thank you for inviting me onto your show.
Fantastic. So why don't we start with just how did you get involved with Japanese football and when did they really start taking youth development seriously?
Yeah, well, I could take up just an hour just on that, how I got involved here. But just to start at the beginning, I came in the mid-1980s. I got involved introduced to Japanese football. I was a player first. I played for Hitachi FC, which is now in the J League, and basically played a couple of years. And then got out of playing and I decided I wanted to stay here in Japan. And so I decided I wanted to stay connected to football. And I started to apply my trade as what we'd call a football clinician, going around the country doing events with a bunch of my former teammates or friends as well, actually, former Japanese players and national team players. And there's a timeline. I mean, we can talk about it along the way because I've been here for 40 years, so I can't possibly tell you about my whole career here, but I can tell you that I'm basically specialized as a technical coach. Surprise, surprise. So that's why I do a lot of media because of, again, as you said in the intro, the characteristic that jumps out about Japanese players foremost is that they're very good technically. And there's no doubt I can talk about that intimately, probably better than anybody else here in Japan because of the work that I introduced back in the early 90s, which was based off of the philosophy and methodology of the Dutchman named Will Curver. And so I was the guy, very well known for this in Japan, introduced the content text and the work, the content and the work of the Curver methodology here to Japan. That was my company. I found an investor. He invested heavily into it, and we built a massive company. And the company was centered around commercial football schools and started out in 1993. Fast forward today, it's 2025, and we have over 150 of these schools all over the country. So these really were like satellite little training centers where kids would show up and get specialized training between the ages of 6 and 12. So I started that and I was the face of it, of the brand for about 15, 16 years. But then I left the company about as long as well, 16 or 17 years ago. So I'm not here to promote this business, but it plays a huge role in Japanese football. And most people don't know about it. Therefore, they don't quite understand this technical revolution. But that was just one piece of it. And then a big part of my background is I've done over 2,000 events in Japan. And these events are basically going around the 47 states or prefectures and holding these big football events, massive events, 300 to 600 kids at a time. And what happened, it turned into, I did this for 20 years in Japan. And it was building the advocacy. It was building the advocacy about trying to introduce and highlight this program of technical skill acquisition. Again, we've got over 20, fast forward now, and we've got over 20,000 kids in these schools at any given time. I was also casted on Japan's #1 TV show. So I found many different ways to deliver the message because it became a movement here in Japan. It still is. If you want to be a good football player, it starts with the technical component. And so you have to understand that, and a lot of people don't understand that. They come to Japan on a fact-finding mission, like from a federation, or they visit one of the J League clubs, and they only get maybe half of the story. They don't get the full story of what happened in the grassroots because not a lot of people specialize in it. Not a lot of people understand grassroots football development because it's mostly seen as a kind of an obligation rather than an opportunity. So there's not a lot of specialists that can really explain and articulate why Japan has become so good. So if you go to the J League, They will give you their mantra of why. We have promotion relegation. We have 3-tiered system. We have 62 teams. We bring in, we've got an academy. We've got so many licensed coaches, blah, blah, blah. You go to the JFA, they'll say, okay, we've got, 47 prefectures. We all have state associations inside the state. We break it down to mini community training centers. We have 8 regional training centers. We have a national training center. We have all of these coaches that have, license, credentials, blah, 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 blah. But they don't understand the grassroots part. So that's the part where kind of I come in, and that's what I've been doing. And my life's work has been here creating an ecosystem around it. Best-selling DVDs that focus only on technical skills. I wrote several books that became bestsellers, only focused on technical skill development. Got casted on Japan's #1 TV show for children, delivering a 1-point lesson every day to 5 million households that lasted 14 years every weekday. So there's a lot of different things that went into it, and it kind of created the perfect storm. And back in those days, we did it kind of by trial and error, organically, whereas today, fast forward, I can do it, or we can do it by design because we understand it. So that's a little bit of the background. Probably gave you a little bit too much than more than you bargained for. But
That's
that's kind of the background of what I do, and that's kind of the story of Japan's technical revolution.
So that's very interesting because we have attempted to twice implement a national curriculum, first in 2009 and 2014. The nationality of the person involved, same nationality as Kovo, is a Dutch school. So we have like 3 basically phases. We have like a curriculum for the 5 to, I believe, 8-year-olds, which we call the game discovery phase, 9 to 13, which is skills acquisition. Then we have the final phase, which is preparing you for matches after that. All those phases, the idea is to try and have training sessions. We have lots of touches of the ball. Hansberger was big on holistic over isolated training, which I understand is quite controversial, and essentially developing your technical skills. And I was wondering if you could go in, what's similar, what's different about the Australian national curriculum, because I do understand that you are quite familiar with it.
So the national curriculum that was written by Hamburger and a guy named Kelly Cross. Basically, these are guys that are working at Football Australia. It's very interesting because Kelly Cross actually comes from a curver background. So even if you back up a little bit, one layer before that, it's important to understand that back in the mid-1990s, Football New South Wales became the licensee of curver coaching for not just Australia, but Oceania. So there was about a 10-year run. Football New South Wales, everything they were doing at the elite level for junior football was all curver. Then Kelly left. He went to the Football Australia. Hamburger came in, and they actually hired the international director of curver coaching to actually help them put this curriculum together. And he went around the country doing like certification for players too, as well. But here's where I kind of think they got it wrong. So the phases of development, you're right. The first phase was called the discovery phase, and it went from 6 to 9 years old. And they built the characteristics of a 6 to 9-year-old. Said they were clumsy, lacked motor skills, short attention span. So what they recommended was to play fun games related to football. Trust me, I know the whole curriculum inside out. Then the 10 to 13 is the skill acquisition phase. So they thought that this is the golden age for learning and teaching technical skills. So what I started to challenge was not only they got it wrong for the 10 to 13-year-olds, they got it wrong for the 6 to 9-year-olds. So now fast forward, and all my current work now, and I think it completely debunks it, is that skill acquisition happens from a much earlier age. So when this curriculum came out, and they were very strict about making sure that everybody adopted it, you basically are focusing on kids between the ages of 10 and 13. They call it the SAP program, right? The Skill Acquisition Program. Although it's a good curriculum, these organizations, they're not getting the results that they expected they were going to get. They weren't seeing this giant leap forward, everybody. And one of the things with grassroots football is that it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So when you put a strategy in place, you need about 10 years to see if it works or not. But when it doesn't work, then you're back to square one again. And so you're in a 20-year cycle. So to me, this is what's been happening in Australia for these last couple of decades. You're not seeing a lot of change. And if you look at and consider all those players that came to what I call the golden age, just all, you got so many great players, Harry Kuehl, Zelich, all these guys. To me, they were Kulina. I mean, there's just all of them. I've studied a lot of the Australian players, and a lot of these guys were basically products of the early Head Start. So I think that the curriculum, yeah, and I think that's why they've kind of pretty much kind of like thrown the curriculum out the window now in Australia. But I think it set them back, and I think we're seeing it now because you can see that you just don't have those technical players that you used to have. Australia, when I was working in the Curver company, and I oversaw Australia, that was my baby. That was my responsibility. That's why I spent so much time there. And we used to brag about how good the players were in Australia technically compared to Japan in the early days. Yeah, that's the reality of it. And to this day, still, you'll find this funny, but coaching is not that high level here in Japan. This is the biggest kind of little, I don't know what you call it, maybe miscalculation. There's a miscalculation about skill acquisition overall. And that is that, well, what's the golden age and how do we do it? Right. And the reality is, and I'll take a quote from Roy Keane, who says, skill was and never will be the result of coaching. It's a love affair between the child and the ball. So for me, very simple, what separates countries from other countries is not the coaching, it's the culture. So there's two ways that you develop players. First of all, countries do not develop players. Countries don't, federations don't. It's either clubs or culture. And to me, culture is winning like 100 to like 3. So when you look at what really goes into, and I've studied this intensely together with universities such as Harvard, Stanford, University of Houston, and I've done thousands of events. I've seen the science now. And what is science? Science is observation, and can you measure it? And there's absolutely no doubt now that the biggest problem for me with football, and I think always still to this day in Australia, is there's too much emphasis on the elite player structures, man. There's too much emphasis on coaches' education. There's an obsession with coaches' education. And the reality is that a majority of kids in Australia at the grassroots level will not benefit from the high level of coaching that they have, because your coaching in Australia is better than it is here in Japan. Okay.
Wow.
So
So I
it's
do
not.
want to, there was a lot of content, really rich content in there. I do want to go through
Sure.
that one at a time. So obviously we mentioned your latest vision, which is to bring in skills acquisition early, actually much earlier. So I want to dedicate basically the second half of this pod to that. But I want to go into a couple of the things earlier. First, comparing what Japan did to our curriculum. So the 6 to 9 is where we said game development. We don't do the skills acquisition. You said that's earlier. So first question, in the 90s in the COVA method, did they do skills acquisition earlier, or is that like a problem which has been across the board, or were we similar to
Okay.
Japan?
First of all, just to compare, to understand what you're talking about in Australia, you're talking about the curriculum of the national curriculum. Here in
Yeah.
Japan, I've never seen a national curriculum. Maybe there's one exists. I've never seen it. Okay. And I don't think anybody's working off a national curriculum here for junior kids. The Curver stuff was completely independent, commercial, completely separated from the federation or the J League at all. Later on in our history, there would come a time where they would invite us in and we did training for some of their coaches and things like that, and they accept it. But in the beginning, it's a standalone program, okay? We're specialized just in technical training. So Curver is very simple. It's geared for children who cross over the line into organized play and between the ages of 6 and 12. And they only come to the school once a week. They come to the school once a week. And basically, the other days and on the weekends, they play with their teams. Okay. So it's not this like intense curriculum that kids are training every single day. Although, coupled with that, we did a good job of going around and working with coaches as well, just basically putting on coaching clinics and seminars, activities, trying to influence, the curriculum and the content that coaches would use when they played. But you can't really kind of compare it in Japan and Australia in that way. Although the Curver program at Football New South Wales, they had a good 10-year run, was producing a lot of good players. Harry Kuehl came through that program, man. So they stopped it. And then there was absolutely no, intentional kind of delivery of a technical curriculum aside from the SAP program, which SAP is basically an elite program, but it's also a pay to play. So it has many, many flaws to it, And so what my argument is that technical skill development shouldn't, if you have to show up to a team to start to learn the basic building blocks, you're already way behind in football. You're way behind. And that's what's happening in Australia with most of the kids. You got two types of players: kids who cross over the line into organized play, like my two boys. When my two boys at the age of 6 went to their first training session, they were the best kids on the field already. They had already mastered the basic building blocks. So that kid will benefit from, and that's a good question. Maybe if you have a good coach, they will benefit maybe from good coaching. The other kids, many of them like in Australia, they're showing up to their first practice expecting to learn the basics. That's it, man. So if you understand that, you're halfway there to figuring out how to solve the problem. It happens way before because the football world hasn't caught up to what science knows. And that is skill acquisition happens earlier, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's the kind of the gist of it. So yeah, I mean, I think that was what the big mistake was. But even at Curver, when I worked there for 15 years, we didn't understand the 2, 3, 4, 5. We didn't understand the impact that the parents played as well. We just thought, okay, this is a good technical skill curriculum. And the more we practiced, the more repetition, the better the players became. That's basically what our philosophy was.
And the second thing you brought up before we go, so again, getting back to the, obviously really excited to talk about how to deal with, how to teach 2 to 5 year olds and bring in that football culture. But before that, I want to talk about something you mentioned just at grassroots level, like the huge gap that you can have sometimes between the elite kids and the non-elite kids. I've heard sometimes from people here, now these are fans, these are no one associated with Football Australia or any A-League club, that says essentially that it doesn't really matter how the grassroots is doing because all the best kids are in A-League academies already by a fairly young age, or the elite academies already. So it doesn't really matter. We just need to focus on that and improve that coaching and get that. But why would it matter why there's how the next tier is going, how the whole ecosystem is going compared to that absolute elite kids?
Very simple. Because unless you close the gap between the grassroots worst players and the elite players in the academy, you have a very tiny elite player pool. That's exactly what's wrong with Australia today. The gap between your best kids and your least developed kids is like the Pacific Ocean. It's too big. The gap in Japan, tiny. So now we have an explosion. So every time I sign on to my iPhone and look at the news, almost on a daily occasion these days, another Japanese player has signed with a major club in Europe. How many of the Socceroos are playing at major clubs? Can you name some that are at major, like I'm talking big club, La Liga, Premier League, the German league? There's not that many. There used to be, but they're not that many, right?
Yeah, if you go big five, they're all basically bottom of the table. Some got relegated recently. You'd have
Exactly. So that's the
about
difference
5, I
right
think.
there.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
anybody that says that the grassroots doesn't matter, they don't understand football development, because and I would challenge that those players that are in the academy, they might not even qualify as elite players here in Japan because the gap is too big. So the only way to make those better players better is by making the worst players better. They're the ones that are going to push the best players to play better. So for example, you're a coach of an under 10 team and you have 2 really dynamite kids and the other 18 kids are so-so. Well, how do you make those 2 other players better? Because they know that every time they come to a game, you're going to play them in their preferred position. They're probably going to play the full game. Probably even if they miss training that week, you're going to put them in on the weekend. That's why they're never pushed. But look at today's Premier League or La Liga. Every single player that's even sitting on the bench, okay, is on a national team. So you don't know what the starting 11 is going to be on any given week unless there's an injury and it's a big star. But this is exactly the problem in Australia, man. The gap. When I go to Australia, the guys that I work with, they know where to drive me to go watch the good players, okay? They know where they are, okay? Here in Japan, they're everywhere, man. And in the Latin countries as well, they're everywhere. So that's the difference between a really kind of, changing the gap and why it's so important to ensure that the grassroots level, from the very, very early level, like a 6, 7-year-old in Spain, that kid is ready to be coached, man. A 6, 7-year-old kid in Australia is not going to be ready to coach because they haven't mastered the basic fundamentals. They can't even transfer the ball from the right foot to the left under no pressure, let alone, try to take a player on 1 versus 1. So this is it. It's the basics.
Absolutely. And one last question before we move on to early development. So you mentioned pay to play. So in Japan's football revolution, they also, I'm sure they never had a curriculum, that's true, but I'm sure they had coaching licenses here. Here I hear our coaching licenses are very, very intense training. And going through all that, my understanding is what happens is that you're even at the grassroots, like if you're talking an MPL or even MPL2 club, if you've gone through all that, you have to basically employ your youth coaches part-time and your technical director part-time, because you can't get volunteers to do that. Some can, but it's very rare. So that ends up being a cost. So I've heard an estimate of about $1,300 per year per kid, transferred onto of the coaches' wages and the technical directors' wages onto the kids. It sounds like, did you guys avoid that in Japan, or was it just not that much?
I have rarely ever seen a licensed coach of any sorts coaching anybody under the age of 12 in this country.
Oh, wow.
That's one thing. So we can put that to bed right there. The cost is there's no barrier to getting in here. All you pay for your uniform. That's it. So you pay for the uniform for a year, and then almost 99% of all the teams are volunteer coaches, inexperienced, sometimes experienced volunteer dads, rarely any moms, they're all dads. Community based. I'm pointing out this window. If you were to come here and I open my window, you can see the elementary school, which is first grade to sixth grade. That's 6 to 12. Out this window is the junior high school. They both have pitches there. Okay. My kids just go out the door, they go to training. Doesn't cost a penny other than buying the uniform. And there's no travel team. There's no long distance to go to play games. We play way more games, probably 10 times more games, practice games, than we do official games. So the reason Japan is so good is because we overtrain. There's negative in it as well that people don't talk about. Japanese players, they train too much. But that's why we develop so many good players, because football skill development is about repetition, about doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. And culture allows that when a little 6-year-old joins a team, mom and dad accept the fact that little 6-year-old is going to train 4 times a week, 3 hours a training session, and play games every week, 52 weeks a year. There's no on-off season. So you can't replicate that in Australia or America. It doesn't happen. That's why I kind of always chuckle when I hear people say, well, why can't we play like the Japanese? Because you're not Japanese. You want to play like Pep Guardiola, you got to become Pep Guardiola. That's there's just a lot of misinformation going around that people don't understand. So what's a good strategy for youth development? And I can tell you, a lot of people don't understand it. That's why if we start with a couple of when I do presentations around the world. I do it for FIFA, UEFA, the biggest clubs in the world. And I want to at least get some understanding here. And that is that FIFA is made up of 211 member associations. Well, do you know how many of those on the men's side have won a World Cup tournament out of 211? Can you take a guess? 8, right? And out of that 8, there's only a couple of serial repeat winners, right? Mm-hmm. No country's ever won a World Cup tournament with a foreign coach, ever. So the culture is so strong. And so even out here in Asia, so you see the same repeat countries, right? But people are trying to figure out youth development, but they're asking the wrong questions, and they're still kind of bringing in the old instead of the new, which can maybe be a good segment into the next corner probably that we're going to talk about.
Absolutely. So as of late, you've already introduced some of this. You've started to believe that the pre-coaching time, the time when you're just alone, falling in love with the ball, when you're 2 to 6 years old, is ultimately where the majority of your development is happening, and not just for the elite kids, but your entire football ecosystem. So right down, improving the 14th division in the country all the way up to the absolute best. Can you tell us how you started thinking that, and also, if you don't mind, double-barreled question. You mentioned scientific research. What is some of the research which convinced you of this?
Sure. Well, what made me change my mind is, first of all, specializing as a technical coach. So I've seen thousands of players. I've worked with them. I'm not like one of these kind of armchair coaches where I'm sitting here and I'm talking theory and hey, buy my book, and I've done it. I know it sounds arrogant or egotistical. I know what I know because I've done it already, right? So I've seen that journey from grassroots to national teams. I've seen girls that have played at 8, 9 years old and then win a World Cup tournament, or players at the very young ages go to play, captain of Liverpool or whatever. So I've seen what that training is. So I can't be fooled into thinking that, it's about elite player structures. No, it's got to do with the grassroots. So the biggest epiphany I had was when I had my own children. So I was always working with other people's children, but when I had my own children, it wasn't until I started to introduce a ball to them, and I introduced the little tiny balls inside the house, because they're little kids. I'm not going to put a size 5 ball in front of a little 1 or 2 year old. So I use these little balls, and then it's well documented, but I basically documented through video the development of my kids. And I became obsessed a bit about development because Again, I wanted to answer that. I wanted to find an answer to that question. Why out of 211 countries, only 8 countries, and the serial repeaters of like Brazil, Germany, Argentina, Spain's only won once, England's only won once. You've got Uruguay, but it was a phenomenon. So if it's all about coaching, then when the coaches move around, why don't they win World Cup tournaments then? Why is it the same countries all the time, right? So I started studying these countries, trying to figure out, do they have better coaches education, better curriculums? Bro, none of those countries have curriculums, by the way. Their coaching isn't any better at the youth level than it is anywhere else in the world. But what they have is a culture of development that starts earlier and conducive to developing top players. Latin parents in particular, Latin fathers, will use a ball to bond with their kids. So they're getting a huge head start, man. So it's much more to do with motor skills. It's not about teaching and introducing the game of football to kids. It's getting them to fall in love with playing with the ball. Little 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old that prances around with a ball at their feet. They're not thinking about, oh, I'm going to play on the weekend, 11 versus 11, I'm going to score goals and, blah, blah, blah. So it's a completely different mindset. So, yeah, I mean, I saw through my own kids how development takes place. And very rarely anybody, and trust me, I know because I go around the world meeting with the biggest clubs in the world, and almost nobody can explain what that real journey looks like from the time they walk until national team.
So was there also, once you started noticing with your kids, did that lead to some scientific research essentially showing that this is the...
Yeah, well, first of all, I didn't do this with the purpose of trying to research or figure out, that basically there's a blind spot in development, and that is the role that parents play. To this day, all the national curriculums, like that national curriculum in Australia, you can go and Google it. You go check back at the two. There's no word of either parent or family. They don't exist in the curriculum. So when I started to see that and understand that we've gotten it wrong and that the football world hasn't caught up to what science knows, that was just very, very powerful to me. But when I started to see what my kids could do with the ball, and because I'm a technical coach, I discouraged kicking, which is so different counter to what most people do, because if you go around and people don't know unless you tell them. Now, be more aware the next time you go around wherever you're living, Sydney or Melbourne or wherever you are, or any country in the world, go around to the parks and see what's happening. And you'll see the parents are kicking the ball back and forth. Boom, boom. Or they're in front of the goal and they're shooting all the time. Well, because I'm a technical coach, I knew the importance of ball mastery. So there's a lot of science involved, man, a lot of neuroscience involved. It's so funny because still a lot of people misunderstand me on social media. They think it's about, oh, just put a ball on the living room and let the kid play with the ball. That's like 1/10 of it. What the real magic is giving knowledge to the parents. First of all, why is ball mastery important? Okay. What are the benefits? Because there's 100 benefits outside of becoming a better football player that are more important to a parents, like teaching a child how to pay attention, teaching a child how to focus, concentrate, agility, balance, literacy, numeracy. Literacy as in you're telling them to do something at 2 or 3, understandings taking place and they're following it. Numbers, counting, 1, 2, 3, left, right, forward. There's so many things that come out of this. Bonding between a child and a parent. When a child is trying to control an object with their feet at the age of 1 or 2, they're basically learning how to walk at the same time as control a ball. So when you're trying to control a ball with your feet at that age, that's a mental exercise, okay? Because you got to keep it close, you got to focus, you got to pay attention, you got to control your emotions, everything. But the movement makes it a physical action. So here's the science behind it, neuroscience. When you've got the mind and the body, feet, working as one, okay, you got thinking and feeling working as one, that allows the brain, the part of the brain responsible for ball mastery is called the cerebellum. It's the stem. It's called the little brain, behind the brain here. Why that's important, the cerebellum is responsible for motor skills, balance, rhythm. And so these movements are being stored in the cerebellum. But why this is important, because when you have the mind and the body working as one, and you have the interaction of the parent being present, participating, you're creating an emotionally charged environment where deep learning and long-term memory takes place. So when the emotions are the on-off switch for learning. Every thought you have has a biological consequence. It makes a chemical. Every experience, basically, chemical experience, okay? A chemical, basically, anytime when a child is trying to control that ball with their feet and they're sharing that time with the parents, because the mind and the body are working, it's creating a chemical signature, okay, of the experience. That's the definition of emotions, is a chemical signature of any experience that you've ever had. And again, why that's important, because that's where deep learning and long-term memory. So what's happening is that parent being present is the magical part that brings it together. Because a child at 2, 3, 4 isn't going to go waltzing around in an empty room practicing ball mastery. So that's why it's much more deeper when a parent understands what their role is. And I'm not talking about sitting on the phone while the kid's off playing, because the kid will stop. They will not play unless they know the parent is paying attention. So that's where the parent has to learn and understand the reason the child's doing it, because the child wants my attention, my approval, and my praise, right? And that's why. So that's what creates the chemical electrical process in the kid. They want the feedback, man. They want mommy and daddy. I've studied. I got thousands of videos of it. Any kid doing ball mastery with a little kid, with the parents, they will be looking up to see if mom and dad are paying attention. If they're not, they stop. And then also understanding that the longer the practice goes, the longer they're building the neural pathways from the feet to the brain. Okay, because we don't have any opportunities to build those neural pathways. There's a saying in neuroscience called Hebb's Law. Hebb's Law states that nerve cells that fire together, they wire together to make a strong network. So when a child is constantly firing and wiring and moving, when they break it, it's okay, but it's the connection isn't as strong. So, and also the part of the brain responsible for ball mastery is the cerebellum. But here it goes, because of my work with Harvard University, Professor Dr. John Rady, is that the cerebellum was used to mainly believed to be responsible for thinking, for memory, for controlling emotion, all things. But now the new neuroscience has figured out, I'm sorry, I went ahead of myself. The old neuroscience used to think that the cerebellum was only responsible for motor skills, rhythm, balance. But the new neuroscience, thinking, remembering, memory, controlling emotions, decision making, and get this, reading and what they call number configuration. So we have actually measured, we've studied a couple of hundred kids in both the United States and in China. One study was with Stanford University. Another study was with the University of Houston. And we've gotten remarkable feedback from them. We've actually improved the test scores in the cohort that participated in the ball mastery program. We improved their test scores in mathematics by 5 percentage points. In fact, the kids who didn't participate, their test scores actually got worse. We've also lessened the sedentary activity of kids. We've also improved their confidence. We've improved lessened their disciplinary problems, memory. We've just got a whole host of things. So that's the magic that brings the football starts at home kind of piece together, because I can't sit in a room, I used to, with 700 parents and try to convince them to put their kid in a football program, because football's the world's game. We all play it. It's perfect. But I can convince a majority of them to put their kids in a program, because I'm going to make your kids smarter. And that's the difference.
That's very important, because I think most of us aren't going to produce Socceroos and Matildas, but most of us want our kids to succeed in academia and all sorts of and other things in life. So it sounds like even if you don't make it as a footballer, that it's still worth a fuss. We actually have a little we have a 2-year-old here, which we can use to demonstrate this, because I can imagine a lot of people at home could be here's the star of the show.
Hello. Hi.
I can imagine a lot of people at home could be thinking like, oh gosh, how do I get my my little 2-year-old to do step overs? Is this realistic?
Here's the thing. You don't want to focus on the little 2-year-old doing a step over. So there are some basic movements. The first one is basically just putting their foot on top of the ball and balancing with their other foot. That's the first one.
Here we go.
Challenge is, if you understand about early child development, it's difficult with this going on to get her attention to focus is going to be very difficult. She's got the camera there. I'm talking. There's a new person here. So she wants to do other things. But this is exactly, bro. This is exactly the reason why this does not happen in a collective group outside with 20 other little girls. That's the reality. Because the child won't pay attention.
Okay, so what instruction do I give her?
I would just tell her to stand up first. Stand up.
Hey, sweetie, do you want to stand up?
and you want to model it for her, stand up yourself.
Okay.
Just leave her on the floor. Stand up yourself.
Hey, sweetie, look at this.
And just put your foot on the ball. It's better to have 2 balls. I don't know if you have 2 balls, but you got 1. But yeah,
Okay.
I would imagine your demonstration is not going as planned, which is fine, I hear mom in there as well. So that's the whole, but this is a good example. This is a good example why you need that quiet downtime with just mommy and daddy and the child. If you were outside on the field with 20 other little, 2 or 3-year-olds running around, it's hopeless. It's like trying to herd cats, okay? Kittens into
Okay.
a certain direction. The reality is that what ball mastery does is it's conditioning and developing the ability to pay attention. Right now, she can't pay attention, bro. Most kids at that age can't. But if we switched our screens, I can show you 1 and 2 and 3-year-olds that have unbelievable focus and attention that are zeroed in. And that's because they've done it already. You're not going to get that today with her, but the reality is that that's what you want to build up to. But that's the brilliance of ball mastery, because you can develop that ability in a child. And when you do, that's like a superpower. When you can develop the ability of your little girl by the time she's 3, 4, 5, that spills into the classroom, my friend. She can sit and she can pay attention when the teacher's talking. That's the whole reason that Harvard and Stanford University came to me. They don't give a flying hoot about the football component. They care about the child-parent attachment and the cognitive, emotional, social, and physical skills being developed. So this is what I'm talking about. Football starts at home. That's the Trojan horse, man. The reality is that we hook parents in, okay? The most skeptical of parents, by teaching them and giving them the knowledge I'm giving you right now. Like if your wife is still there right now, this is a program that's going to condition your child to pay attention and focus. And when a 2 or 3-year-old can develop that ability to control a ball with their feet, that's like a Herculean task, okay? Because what it is it's a mental exercise. It's a physical, but it's more mental, because she has to focus, pay attention. She has to move her body. And then she's got the body and the mind working. She's got thinking and feeling, the brain, everything is working together. And the brain loves to learn while it's moving. 95% of a child's brain is developed by the age of 5 or 6. So you got a very small window of doing this. So this is much more early child development, brain science, cognitive, social, emotional development, child-parent interaction. And the good benefit is, then you can also become a good football player. But that's why I'm so passionate about what I do, because I get in front of parents and I get the emails every day from parents around the world that send me videos and stuff. And when you see the before and the after, if we were to come back maybe in a year later and you've already been doing this with your little girl and you're showing me the demonstrations, and then you should keep the video that you just had of her just being, she wants to, of course, she's seeing something new. These kids are seeing new things every day that they've never seen before. So it does take a little bit of child, or development to understand what works, what doesn't work. So that's why I always laugh. All of these football schools that parade as like developmental pathways. Okay, we got the little soccer tots or whatever you call them. I don't. And I'm not signaling out any certain ones. But when you've got like 30 little 3-year-olds, they're running outside and those are great. I used to rail against them, but I don't anymore, because it's good to at least get the kids out there. They're socializing. They're running outside. It's better than being on a gadget. But you're not going to develop players like that. And so even when you put your child in a team or in a school at 3, 4, 5, 6, what's happening away from the organized play is going to be 10 times more impactful than what's happening at the organized play. That's the reality of it. And I saw that because when my kids crossed over line into organized play, they both had coaches that were inexperienced. They were volunteer dads that put their hand up, and my kids developed into top players. And the reason why is because here's an elevator pitch. If you can develop players that are highly skilled, confident, competent with a ball before they join organized play, you've basically mitigated 95% of the developmental problems. They cease to become problems. And even paired with the inexperienced volunteer mom or dad, these kids will always develop. They'll always develop.
So I'll indeed make a video or maybe even a few weeks, as soon as she can do something without being distracted by a camera.
That's it, my friend. When you can isolate it, get the basic fundamental building block movement going, and then that's how quickly it takes off. 6 days, 12 days, 1 month, 1 year, 2 years, boom, you're flying. No licensed coach there, no great, beautiful $1 billion facility, just a a little kid and a ball and a mom and a dad to comfort them and to give them support and to bond with them. That's it, man. So imagine in Australia, you've got an army of little boys and girls who are that skilled at ball mastery by the time they cross over the line into organized play. You could throw that national curriculum out the window. You don't need it. So I'm saying it metaphorically. Of course, it's always good to have best practices and this, that, and the other thing. But the majority, the problem is not with the elites in Australia. The problem is at the entry level. But they pretend to believe and think that it's at the elite level, but it's not.
I see. So now let's talk about some points of skepticism. So first one is,
Sure.
how does this avoid becoming like tiger parent sort of thing, where you have like parents who want their kids to play Beethoven by the age of 4, yelling at their kids and 20 extra curricular activities or sort of thing? How do you make this a bonding experience rather than pressure on the kids or trying to force them to play with the ball when they don't want to or something like that?
Education, bro. Education. It's not the good kids' parents that are complaining or burning out the kids. It's the kids that don't develop and the parents are pushing them. Burnout doesn't come from too much practice if it's self-motivated. It comes from being pushed, being structured, being too organized, too much pressure to win. That's where it comes from. A majority of kids that play football in Australia are technically poor, man. That's why the parents get frustrated and they're paying thousands of dollars too on top of it and they see their kids no good. So I don't know. You get burnt out in any country, but I haven't seen it. We don't have that problem in Japan here. Nothing. I mean, it's kind of more of a Western manufactured kind of problem or label that we put that, the parents, they're going to do this. No, I see that the parents with the worst kind of attitude or kind of sideline manner or etiquette are the ones where the kids they're watching them play and they're like, oh, my kid's not doing that well. So, and again, like I said, in this day and age, you're never going to find a kid that's practicing too much or playing too much or anything like that. It's the complete opposite, man. They'll sit and let their kids play on the phone for 8 hours. I think they can push them to play, physical movement for an hour or two. So it's the way you frame things, man. It's like in anything, but it's culture too. In Japan, nobody talks about this like burnout, don't push it. It's not even in the. So again, it's a different culture.
And I guess the second skeptical question would be, now, I'd need to frame the context of this question first, because it's a sensitive question before asking the questions. As our family, we don't have our in-laws present because we are immigrants to England. And I think that describes nearly half of Australia were born overseas.
Sure.
So I think 40% in Melbourne, 40% in Sydney, roughly. This day and age, I know the stats from London, around about 50% do not have both parents living with them. A lot of parents these days, both parents are working full time if they have both parents. And so when you add all that up, parents these days are very, very burnt out. I know when my in-laws are here, so they often visit from either Australia or USA, then the amount of time I get to play with my kids, because I'm not either completely zonked out or doing some housework or doing some work or doing something to keep the show on the road, it doubles roughly, like probably more than doubles when one of my in-laws are here. And of course, we have quite a lot of advantages because, we have both parents still together. And so I guess the context is, a lot of parents are burnt out. They don't have a lot of time. And I guess the question is, is this something which can be done in a way which doesn't put extra pressure on parents, which are already feeling pressure from a lot of places? And B, is there any way for some of the, I guess you could say, the backup parents in society to step in? I know that's a difficult topic. Like we have the backup parents of daycares. We have the backup parents of, could we get like some of this happening in daycares? Can we get some of this happening, say, some of the after school programs?
Yeah.
Or even on, you had mentioned TV programs. I know that's not ideal, but many people are doing it tough. And I just want to hopefully I phrase it as sensitively as possible.
So regardless of how busy you are, or your wife's busy, or you both work, or one of you work, you're still playing with your kid, aren't you? Once in a while.
Yeah.
Right. So there's always time to play with your children. So all we're saying is you might want to use the ball as a toy to play with your child because it's got great benefits, man. Stop thinking it's a football program. Do you want your kid to have balance? Do you want your kid to be focused? Do you want your kid to be able to concentrate? Do you want them to have agility? Do you want them to be active so that they don't have child obesity or child diabetes? So these are the points that are much bigger than the football part. So that's the part that's the brilliant part of the whole football starts at home message, man. And that's engaging with parents. Parents do have to come on. I mean, if they don't have time to come on for 30 minutes or an hour to learn about the program, then they're probably not meant to be in the program then, right? So once they come in and they see all the other benefits, all it is it's It's deep learning, specific, deliberate, intentional practice disguised as playtime, man. That's it is. It's playtime. Did you see the little kid do 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 in his pajamas, man? So who doesn't have time to do that? You could do that for 5 minutes every night before your kid goes to bed. Yeah, I showed you that video. What was that? Was it what, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes? Okay. And then what happens is once they get the basic building blocks, they're curious. They will start experimenting with the more complex, difficult movements. But the problem is most kids don't have the foundation, so they're hopeless. So what we're saying is invest a little bit of time in the beginning, okay? Get your kid off to the flying head start, have the ball or two around the home, and trust me, when you come home from school, when you come home from work, you're going, Daddy, 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 watch me. Just that little bit of touch in the house is better than dropping them off at their first training ground. They never touched the ball and they're not familiar with it. So no, those are good questions. A lot of people ask that, but that's why we frame it in the context of education, early child development. And like I said, the most skeptical of parents, they get it, man, when they see it.
So
Who
we
doesn't
are
want-
talking, by the sounds, only a few minutes a day, essentially. So even if you're like,
Yeah, because they can do it as much as they want without you paying attention once they get going, right? So you're getting that longer practice, but the whole reason that they're doing is because they want your attention. Did you see your little girl? She was climbing on. She wants attention, man. She wants praise. She wants interaction. She wants your eye contact together. That's what it is. So we've just figured out that a ball is one way of doing it, is using a ball.
let's talk about implementation first on the individual, then the organizational level. But let's start with individual. So if some parents listening to this and they want to do something, football starts at home. I understand it's all free. How do we do this? So the first step you said, just tell your daughter or your son, step your foot in the ball, give them praise, enjoy that a couple of minutes a day. After a week, where do we learn what to do from there? Like some bonding things we can do with our kids.
Yeah, first of all, again, it depends on what the age is. We find that the program is best suited for kids between the ages of 2 and 6, could be 7 or 8. It's suited for any kid who's never started playing football. So if you got a 12-year-old that's never played football before, I would also put them through a ball mastery practice. But again, it's for the small kids. It's basically get a small ball. That's very important. You need the small ball because it's a small foot. And then there's a couple of 2 or 3, 4 key movements of basically the ball's always on the ground. Sole of the foot on the ball, balancing, just one foot on the ball. Can try to do circles. I'm doing like this, circles. You can go online. You can find them all, man. They're everywhere. Just go and look for, like, even if you, what do you call it? Even a YouTube, put my name in, Ball Master. You'll see all the videos from my thing. You'll see the whole progression. It's all free. It doesn't cost a thing, man. And just go in and you'll see the visuals. And the important thing is the parent, they don't have to have played ever themselves. The important thing about parents is make some time with your child in the beginning, okay? Organize it. Make sure it's in a good environment. Make sure that you're in a safe environment where the little kid's not going to fall over and hit themselves on a pointed ended of a coffee table in the house, in the living room, okay? You can maybe make it a routine so the child looks forward to it every day, maybe let's say before they go to bed or something. You're always playing with your kids. You should be at least. So this is one way of doing it with the ball. So there's lots of different exercises. Repetition is key, okay? They can do the same moves. One of the methodologies that's very effective is we recommend videoing your kids, showing them the before and the after. I showed you some of those videos already. Did you see it? That kid was 2, 3 years old. Just put the ball down and stationary and go back and forth. There's a couple of key 3 or 4 movements. You can find them online and just practice those. And then just be ready to see a flower blossom. And the kids will just start taking off and they'll start doing more advanced things. They'll speed it up. They'll come up with some new tricks. The important thing is to discourage kicking and encourage ball mastery. It's not rocket science. It's, again, like I said, the most important part is the parents understanding and buying into why they should be doing it because of the benefits. That's it. And once you do that, you're good to go. You don't need anything else.
So since there's only 3 or 4, I hope this is not testing your memory, but could you go through what are those 3 or 4 movements?
Yeah, like I said, it's hard to kind of talk you through it because it's a visual thing, right? But it's basically a slide. You've got your feet floored, and you're dragging the ball to the right, to the left, back. You're just standing with a ball at your feet, and you're just maneuvering it back and forth. Then you're pushing it forward. The right foot pushes it, and the right foot pulls it back. The left foot pushes it, the left foot pulls it back. Then you've got like a V. You put your foot on the top of the ball, pull it back right and push it out with the right. Left reaches for it, pulls it out, pushes it out, and they're working together. Boom, 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 boom. That's it. That's three. Those three movements will get you up and running. That's it. Those three.
That's
And
all
then
they
just
need.
try to control the ball with your feet and keeping it close to you.
All right. So if you're given the keys to the kingdom, I suppose we put you in charge of Football Australia or even a state federation, what would you do? So obviously, most of this is parents involved.
Super easy. Super easy. Day one. I'm going to first of all, if I'm working in a Football Australia or State Association, come into my office. On the back of my wall, you're going to see a map, and there's going to be a pin stuck in everywhere there is a preschool, an early learning center, and a kindergarten. So I know where they are. I'm going to go to those schools and I'm going to say, listen, we've got this great program called Football Starts at Home. It's not just a football program, and it's backed up by neuroscience and academia from Harvard, Stanford, University of Houston. Okay? This is going to make your kids' cognitive, emotional, social, and physical skills. So I would love to, and it doesn't cost a penny. I'd love to hold an event at your school or at some school or some facility, and I'd like you to promote it because we're offering this for free and it's got loads of benefits. And almost every school will say yes. And so what I would be doing is I would be going around the community and like I've done in Australia. Last time I was down, I did 3 or 4 of these huge events at these recreational centers, had a couple hundred people there. And I go through and I do my presentation and I show them what is it? What is Football Starts at Home? What are the benefits? What's the philosophy? How's methodology? And then show them, marry together a belief with an intended outcome. If you do A, B, C, you can expect X, Y, Z. Okay? And try to create a movement throughout the community, throughout the state, throughout the country. I would be seeking for the highest mountain peak with the biggest megaphone to shout down, football starts at home. And I would create an online website content where parents can go that support materials to show, okay, well, what are the basic movements? What do other kids look like when they first started? How can you expect to see them at 5? It's everything I showed you, man. It's everything that I do. So that's how I would do it. And I would just create a movement and then I'd sit back and I'd just let the kids play.
So has there been interest from Football Australia, any state federations?
As always, the chairman of Football Australia, Anter Isaac, he's a good friend of mine. He follows me, the work. I've done stuff down in Australia. All the professionals know of my work. We haven't put a formal, structured commercial program together to do it, but there's a lot of people who know about the work that we do. And who knows, maybe in the future I could be doing a little bit more. But right now, I just make some occasional visits once in a while. I go to some of the community clubs. I was at a whole bunch of different ones when I was there last time, and spreading a good word of Football Starts at Home.
So while we're waiting for the governing bodies to do it, and obviously parents at home hopefully playing with their kids, what can you do if you're a daycare worker, a kindergarten teacher, an MPL, part of an MPL club, or part of a primary school? What can you do if you're...
It's like anything, you got to research it. Watching this interview, hopefully people are going to get a good idea. I've got hundreds of other podcast video interviews online. All the tools are out there. All you need is to be curious. All you need to be is willing to learn and roll your sleeves up and go in and try to convince some organizations that having a Football Starts at Home program at your school, your nursery, your early, whatever, it's got lots of benefits for both growing the game, but also it gives schools another tool in their toolbox to get kids more active. We in China and in other kindergartens I've worked with, some of the schools and the classes, they have a big basket of little balls. And when recess comes, they pull the balls out and the kids practice the ball mastery exercises. And then when they go back to their seats, the teachers, we collect the information, and the teacher's feedback is the kid is more focused, better concentration, better attention span, better memory, and less disciplinary problems. So what teacher would not be for that? So it's about how you frame it. And when we frame it in the context of education, we get little to no resistance.
Sounds very nice. So we'll share on top of this interview, we'll share the basic movements on our, as well as some of your work on our website, greenandgoldfc.com. It's a form which everyone can see, as well as some basic instructions about, how to turn that into a fun game rather than getting on your kid and saying, yelling at them to do something that maybe they don't want to do, turn it into something fun, turn it into something bonding. So we'll cover all that on our, and yes, thank you so much for joining us, Tom. Your work is very, very fascinating. And thank you also for the involvement you've had in Football Australia and in Japan. We love watching them, even if we envy them these days. And for those of you at home, please remember we are on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Please remember to like and subscribe. But until next time, that's all we have time for on Green and Gold FC. Please join us on the forum. But until next time, that's bye for now.